controversy going and some debate, tell us that there is no money out there. Because I think you're wrong. I think there is money out there.
Gee, Mike, I was going to say I don't think there's a shortage, and I really don't. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs are saying that it's hard to raise money, and that is true. Money is always hard to raise. Money should be hard to raise. But I think that right now there's actually a surplus of capital available in the tech sector, and I think that it's actually a pretty good time to raise money right now. The angels were slow during the dip in the economy because they were uncertain, and because they're private individuals, they're not under any pressure to invest. A lot of them did, I think, pull back, but they're back with a vengeance now. As Mike said, he and I were both at the National Angel Capital Association in Toronto last Thursday, and they were telling stories about angel investments that were oversubscribed by 2 or 3 times. Just in the last few weeks, things seem to have really changed dramatically.
Well, Mike, why don't you disagree with us then?
Well, partially, I think it's a function of the nature of the investment that you're looking for. So for institutional money, which we would represent, I think it's a tough time right now just because there are, if you look at the local environment, there are fewer investors around with reasonable capacity to invest. That's true across Canada. It's true in the United States. I would say that the number of investors who are actively out looking for new opportunities is down by 50%, 60% relative to what it was a few years ago. So I would say it's a lot harder now to put a deal together. So one anecdotal piece of evidence is that, you know, our model typically is to try to be the lead investor, and as I said before, we like to invest with syndicate partners. So part of our job is to be the local partner for a company that's looking to raise money, and will look to syndicate that, find other money in Eastern Canada and California, Washington State, whatever. And the number of firms in our network that we could call upon might have been 100, 120 a few years ago. I would say it's probably down to 30 or 40 now, firms that actually are open to looking at a new company. So I think it's harder now than it was a couple of years ago, and takes longer than it did a couple of years ago to pull those larger financings together. They're still doable. We closed one, we've closed actually 4 since the beginning of the year, but they're just a lot tougher to get done. And the terms from our point of view are better. You get more company per dollar invested. The terms are tougher for entrepreneurs these days.
Mike, the venture capital industry is well tracked and well monitored. Just how much is available on the VC side here for companies in British Columbia?
In BC? Boy, I think you know there's only 3 or 4 firms that have a significant amount of money, and I would be surprised if there's more than $250, $300 million available and specifically earmarked for this province.
For this year?
Just available in funds right now. So, and that probably would have to spread over a 3 or 4 year period. So it's probably not even $100 million available per year for new ventures. There is money available for follow-on investments in companies that have already been financed, but I'd be surprised if it's as high as
So you're thinking like probably less than $100 million from so-called venture capital.
Yeah, so if you back into the number of companies that will be financed, I think you're looking on the order of maybe 10 or 20 companies this year, if it's a good year, that will get their first venture financing.
And there are, what, how many tech companies in BC? Maybe 6,000?
We've looked at in the
Pascal, you know,
7 years.
how many members have you got?
Members or companies in BC?
Both.
8,600 in BC.
8,600? And 20 of those will be lucky and score with Mike.
Right. And we've looked at about 1,200 in the last 5 years or so,
okay.
and we've made 8 investments, I think, in BC or something like that.
Okay, so Basil, how much angel capital is available?
You know, it's always hard to measure the amount of angel capital because there's no way to track how much the angels invest. So we don't have good numbers in Canada, but in the States there's been a number of pretty rigorous academic studies done. And up until the economic downturn, it was pretty well accepted that angel investors invested about the same number of dollars as venture capital funds. So in the States, it was about $25 billion in both cases. So here in Canada, the thinking is, and the number that always gets tossed around, is about $2.5 billion in angel investment per year in Canada. That tracks pretty well with what Mike was saying. You know, $250 million here in BC. We're about 10% of the country's population. The other number to keep in mind is that in BC it is about 50,000 accredited investors, so 50,000 formal angel investors. And that $200 million number only equates to about $4,000 per angel investor, so that kind of tracks. The big surprise that came out of some very good research just recently was that friends and family investors are a couple times larger than angels and venture capitalists combined. So in BC, what that means is there's probably a couple $100 million of venture capital, a couple $100 million of angel investment money, and probably $500 million of friends and family money available. And that's why I don't think there's a shortage. I think there's lots of money out there for good quality companies and good quality entrepreneurial teams.
So what we're saying is that venture capital, institutional venture capital, about 100 million, private angel funding probably 500 million plus in that range. I mean, I've seen about 1 to 200, so there's got to be 3 or 4 times that, and then family, friends, and relatives maybe getting close to $1 billion.
I think I was thinking, Mike, more 1 to 200 venture capital, 1 to 200 angel, and then friends and family on top of that for about 500.
Okay, so that gives us a range from a little bit more pessimistic to slightly optimistic. Dean, you had a question.
Yeah, actually, I do have a question, and thankfully I have the microphone, so I get to ask that. Mike, you mentioned 1,200 companies that you've looked at in the last year. I wonder if you could share with everybody, or the last several years,
Yes,
I wonder if you could share with the crowd the kinds of things that really were barriers to you actually making a decision to go forward with some of these companies. And I'll also add that I have the microphone. If anybody has any questions, we really would like to keep it as a dialogue. So just raise your hand. I will make sure to make a note of where you're sitting, and we'll get you to ask the next question if that works. Mike?
Maybe it's easier to talk about what it is that makes a company and an opportunity attractive, because there are all kinds of things that can make something unattractive. You know, one of the things that I suggest to entrepreneurs when they're pitching is to have a theory about what it is about your company that is particularly noteworthy. And so as an example, there are 4 or 5 things that we all look for. It could be a management team, it could be the quality and uniqueness and power and potential of the underlying technology, it could be a juicy market opportunity that you have a unique form of access to. It could just be, beats the hell out of me why this team has accomplished so much, but they've just got momentum. You know, so there's a variety of things like that. And you want to have an idea about what it is that, or at least what works for us is a firm that has a company that has a clear idea about what it is that it's bringing forward. So one of the turnoffs, for example, is a company that comes forward and the first thing they want to talk to you about is their team. And they position their team as being a stellar team and blather on about it, but you look at the team and they really haven't accomplished very much. So they obviously haven't thought about what it is that what it is about them that makes them particularly interesting. And maybe there is nothing interesting about that particular company, but maybe there is something really great about their technology, for example, but they just haven't sort of sorted out what it is and brought that forward and kind of pushed the rest of it to the background. But I would say that we say there's got to be something to work with in a company for us to get traction with it, and invariably that comes down to, in our firm, either the quality of the people or something really interesting about the technology they're working with.
Okay, there was a question over here.
Go ahead.
Yes?
Yeah, you talked, Mike, about quality of team. I'm wondering if you could refer to that, just to make a quality team in your eyes. And I imagine as an investor, you see all types of teams.
So your question is, what's he looking for in the team? What qualities?
In terms of a balance of, I say, qualifications, experience, and just that feeling, model of an ideal team. What would you look for? Is that really a barrier for a job?
Well, you know, I think more than anything, we're looking, in fact, Amielle said this at the beginning, she was attracted to investors who had been successful with their investors' money. So I think the number one attractant is if